Hello and welcome to PixelTunes Radio. I'm Ed.
And I'm Mike. We did that backwards.
We are doing that backwards today.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
Spooky.
Today, we are advancing. Last episode was the Game Boy. Today we're doing a console spotlight on the Game Boy Advance.
What? I likes me some Game Boy Advance.
It was probably my favorite handheld, I
Yeah.
think. Even towards today, I think. I mean, I really like the DS, but the Game Boy Advance was a Super Nintendo in your hand.
Yeah, pretty much.
You can pretty much just take all those games that I loved as a kid and throw it in your pocket and get on with your life while playing video games at the same time.
Get on with your life. Get on with your life. Stop playing these video games. So, the Game Boy Advance, I guess I would say that the best part about it for me was being still able to play the Game Boy and Game Boy Color games while also picking up these new titles for Game Boy Advance. A lot of the titles that were on Super Nintendo that came over to the Game Boy Advance, it was like hit or miss. You know, like titles like Final Fight 1 was like a really, really good port of Final Fight. But then you look at like Earthworm Jim and you're like, really?
Yeah.
You know?
And it was interesting because the Game Boy Advance was a lower resolution system. The screen was only 240 by 160, which is far lower than the resolution of your average TV.
True.
But it had a 32-bit processor,
Yeah.
and a processor that was much faster than the Super Nintendo's. So you had more advanced games in the SNES, but they were at a lower resolution. So
Right.
the graphics were like better in terms of animation and like sprite size, but lower in terms of the resolution. So it was kind of a weird
It's like a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a lot of really cool effects that were kind of transitioned and brought over from the Super Nintendo, like Mode 7 made, I guess you could say, a reappearance in the Game Boy Advance and the hardware.
Yeah, and the GBA also had, rudimentary, like, polygonal capabilities, too, where you can actually move in 3D space.
Yeah.
They were able to kind of fool the Game Boy and the NES and the Super Nintendo into doing that, but the GBA had more of a processor that could actually handle real flat-shaded polygons.
Yeah, I guess 10 years kind of makes a difference, too.
Sure does.
So, and there were a lot of genres that kind of came to the system that weren't prevalent even on the Super Nintendo, like first-person shooters. I mean, yeah, you had them on the Super Nintendo, but they were usually really shoddy ports, and you were able to see some really incredible games and really incredible titles come to the Game Boy Advance that you would have never seen on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, the ports of Doom and Doom 2 were pretty good on the
Yeah,
GBA.
yeah, that's true. Trying to play the games on the Game Boy Advance without a backlight. I mean, the game system went through so many different versions. I mean, you've got the Game Boy Advance, which was the standard model, and then you've got the Game Boy Advance SP, which was a complete redesign. I mean, I will say that Nintendo really did a fantastic job in redesigning it.
Yeah.
And so it had the flip open with the, instead of just the handheld, like you would get with a regular Game Boy, this one flipped open, and it had a backlight, so the SP was really cool. And the first SP I ever got was the NES version, and I still have it to this day, the same one. It's the Game Boy Advance SP, the Nintendo edition, which basically looks like a Nintendo.
Yeah, it's got that black stripe down the right side of the top.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then I didn't get a Game Boy Micro. Those were the third redesign, which was smaller, more compact, didn't play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, but it did play Advance. I always wanted one of those just to kind of mess around with it, because it's so small and super tiny, and it's more just the sort of system where you can just shove it in your pocket and go.
Yeah.
And instead of like having this big bulky wad of Game Boy Advance in your pockets.
The Game Boy Advance was the first system that came out where I was really like full-grown adult, knew that I was a gamer through and through.
Okay.
So me and my buddy Jay, who later went on to actually work in the video game industry, we heard about it coming out and there were pre-orders going on. We went on eBay and we actually pre-ordered Japanese units on eBay.
Yeah.
So we got them a full 3 months before they came out in the US.
Okay.
Like they shipped them to us like the day after launch day in Japan.
Wow, that's cool.
And we were both Street Fighter fanatics. So we got the Super Street Fighter game that came out.
Okay.
And then the first Mario Advance game. And they were in Japanese, but Jay knew Japanese very well, so he was able to translate menus and stuff, even though they were two games that you really didn't even need to know Japanese. It was nice just being able to do that.
So was it a lot of like you kind of both sitting next to each other and going through the menus like together and be like, well, what's this mean?
Yeah, kind of.
Like that.
He would just basically, because with at least Street Fighter, there's the difficulty settings and stuff. I don't even remember if it was. Sometimes those game menus are in English in action games, even if it's a Japanese native system. But it was nice because the Game Boy Advance was compatible with both import games and US games, so we didn't have to worry about getting United States games down the line and not being compatible with our Game Boys.
Yeah. So
we both got the white ones, like the very first models that came out.
Yeah.
And then, so we just played the crap out of it.
Yeah.
And it's awesome having a system that's not out in the US yet because you can kind of bring it around and like
people
friends that are
like,
gamers are like, is that Game Boy Advance?
Yeah.
How did you get one?
I imported it on eBay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's cool. I eventually, I think I ended up trading that one away or selling it to Funcoland or something at that point. I mean, I have an SP, which I still have.
Yeah.
But I still have those import games, which is pretty cool. It's a nice memory.
That's the thing about the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. I can still go back, because I said last episode I collect Game Boy Pockets. So I could still go back, and even though there's no light or whatever, I can still manage, I'm okay with managing those. But I can't ever picture owning a Game Boy Advance knowing that there's a Game Boy Advance SP out, because it's like, it's just funny. It's like Nintendo made Game Boy Advances not collector's items.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to go and be like, I want a Game Boy Advance, when they can just get an SP with a backlight.
Well, there was that Afterburner add-on, which was a third-party kit that you could buy.
Yeah.
You'd have to take apart the Game Boy Advance, and then you would attach LED lights onto the circuit board, and then it would actually backlight your original Game Boy Advance.
That's
and
cool.
I had a couple friends that did that, and it looked really good.
That's cool.
And, I thought about getting it done, but for some reason I never ended up doing that, and I just got an SP instead.
Yeah.
So there are ways to make the original
Yeah.
Game Boy Advances a little more modern in the sense of being able to actually see it when you're not in broad daylight.
Right. All right, so my track, of course, as we normally do, I pick 5, Ed picks the other 5. So my first track is Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, and this track is called Offense and Defense. The soundtrack was composed by 2 people, Soshiro Hokkai and Michiru Yamane. Now, Michiru Yamane really doesn't need much introduction. We've played tracks from her before. She's pretty much the Castlevania composer for the series from Bloodlines onwards. And we're not going to talk about Lords of Shadow because that's not Castlevania.
Says you.
Says me and all hardcore Castlevania fans. But Soshiro Hokkai actually composed for other Castlevania games and also did Nano Breaker. So he did Area of Sorrow and, of course, Harmony of Dissonance. Those are his only 2 credits other than Nano Breaker. So this soundtrack is really cool. It's very different from other Castlevania soundtracks in the sense that, yeah, it's got the Baroque era symphonic elements and everything, but it's also very all over the place. I mean, one minute you'll be listening to a track that's very jazz fusion oriented, very just noise all over the place, but you can hear it that it's very fusion oriented. And then you've got other tracks like this, which kind of have this mysterious feel to it, almost like it's like rock based, like it transforms into something rock based. But it starts out as something where you're kind of it's like a mystery, coming out of the woods or something like that. It's really cool.
And the time signature kind of changes
it's
up a little
all
bit.
over the place.
Yeah.
This soundtrack is very all over the place with the time signatures, and so you're going to hear it for yourself. But that's pretty much it. That's all we got for Harmony of Dissonance. What did you think of this track when you heard it?
It wasn't my favorite.
No?
This isn't. We've talked about our differences in the style of music and how I really I can appreciate the more progressive time changes and such as talent and music, but I really just like the standard 4/4 rock or techno beat.
Just driving beats.
Yeah, but at least speaking on the game, I can say that it was really awesome to have a Metroidvania, like a Symphony of the Night style Castlevania in your pocket.
Yeah.
The 3 Castlevania games on the Game Boy Advance
they're all great.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, but this one, I don't know. This one gave me a more Simon's Quest feel to it. I always felt like it was kind of the underdog of the series, and the Area of Sorrow, of course, is the big superstar, kind of like the Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
Everybody loves that game. And then Circle of the Moon is now retconned story-wise, but whatever. It was the first Game Boy Advance game, and Circle of the Moon, I gotta say, introduced some really cool elements with the card capturing and using the elements and stuff.
Yeah.
Harmony of Dissonance was kind of in between those two. Why don't you give a listen to it and see for yourself what it sounds like? This is PixelTunes Radio, Harmony of Dissonance, Offense and Defense.
Enjoy. that was the menu screen theme from Racing Gears Advance.
Cool song.
Doesn't even sound like it's coming out
No.
of a chip-based Game Boy.
Really
you know?
impressive. Yeah, no, it's really cool.
That was composed by Neil Voss, who really has only done 3 games for the more modern systems. He
Okay.
started off, like everybody, he started off on the C64. If you don't have a Japanese name, I guess you started off on the C64.
I guess so, yeah.
But he did Tetrasphere and...
For the N64?
For the N64.
Okay.
And also the new Tetris on the N64. Both of which had phenomenal soundtracks.
Yeah.
And we'll be hearing from those on future podcasts.
Yeah, good stuff.
And then he did Racing Gears Advance in 2005 after he had done those 2. And just really knew how to take advantage of the hardware. You know, these songs are mostly sample-based. There's a very big Prodigy, Chemical Brothers, Big Beat influence in most of his music.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, the games themselves are mediocre, I'm not going to say. I mean, Tetrasphere was decent. but it
Tetrasphere was
wasn't
pretty good.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the music is like what really keeps you going and playing, at least in my opinion. Just because they're fantastic. So now Neil Voss has gone on to do like creative apps for mobile devices. So he's got this app called Ultra Visual, which is kind of like a photo collection app where you can kind of make photo collections into pieces of art and share it with other people.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Alrighty.
So what's our next track that we're playing?
The next track that we're going to be listening to is from Konami's Krazy Racers, another Konami title. And the track we're going to be listening to is Sky Bridge. This is a really happy, fun, bouncy song. I really dig this track.
Yeah, this is actually it's more of a chip-tuney version of a Twinbee track from the Twinbee, or Stinger as it's known on the NES, arcade games.
Yeah.
So that's what Crazy Racers kind of did. It was a collection of Konami characters.
Basically Mario Kart for Konami.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, I think Konami Crazy Racers was a little bit better than Mario Kart Super Circuit or Mario Kart Advance.
No, I agree with that totally. It's a really fun game.
Yeah, for a launch title, they really had a handle on that hardware. It ran very smoothly, the music was great, graphics were phenomenal.
So the composer was Sotaro Tojima, and he was pretty much a Konami guy. He worked first at T&E Software doing Sonata and Blaze and Blade Busters. That is a mouthful right there.
Bust your blade.
Bust your blade, girl. Then he moved on to Konami to do Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Pop and Music series, and Konami Crazy Racers. Also later on did Metal Gear Solid 3, Twin Snakes, Solid 2, Zone of Enders, The Second Runner, and Metal Gear Solid 4. He then moved on to Microsoft to do Halo 4 soundtrack, so he was actually the audio director for that.
Yeah, he actually worked on Smash Brothers Brawl, too.
Yeah, well, there were so many people that worked on Brawl's soundtrack.
Well, yeah.
Good stuff from this guy.
I wanted to explain why a lot of our songs are going to be kind of differing in quality a little bit.
I apologize for the suckiness.
Well, you know, some are going to sound really crisp and really clear. Mm-hmm. Some of them might sound a little gritty.
Yeah, like muffled or gritty sound.
Yeah. The Game Boy Advance had a really interesting sound hardware. It had direct audio channels.
Okay.
Which, kind of similar to the Super Nintendo, you can like load sound fonts into it and make it sound how you want rather than like an FM chip like the Genesis had, or you know the arcade games had.
Yeah.
But then it could also use the Game Boy tone generators that were built in to enhance the existing direct audio channels. You'll hear like in some of the Game Boy Advance songs, you'll have like, you know, compressed audio for the drums, but then you'll hear like really crisp tones for the lead synths, and it'll almost sound like a Game Boy.
Yeah.
So that's where that kind of comes from. And also, ripping audio from a Game Boy Advance is not an easy job.
No, it seems like it's really impossible to do.
There were different audio engines depending on the game, so some of them it's very easy to get the music out of, and you can make it sound really good. Other ones, you really can't get it all. You actually have to hook up, you know, like a recording device to the Game Boy Advance.
Wow.
And hope that there's a sound test or an area in the game where you can play it and not hear any sound effects.
Yeah.
So some of these titles, you're going to hear like a really crisp, might sound even better than coming out of a Game Boy Advance.
Yep.
And some of them are going to sound either like a Game Boy Advance or maybe even a lower quality, but we did do a lot of research and try to get the best quality song for the songs that we really wanted to play.
Because we like you a lot.
Yeah, so I just didn't want you guys to be like, why does this song sound fantastic and this one not so fantastic? Well, we're doing our best to bring you the best quality we can.
There you go.
So, let's get on with the music.
Yeah, this song is called, again, Skybridge, Konami's Crazy Racers. Check it out.
Why Racer?
Dispatch, I've located the terrorist cell. They've got hostages in cages. No need for backup. I've got this one covered.
We read you loud and clear, Ninja Cop. Don't forget to change your costume every time you grab a power-up.
Roger that. Out. Now, I just need to grapple up to...
Hello there.
Ah, Ryu. Doesn't this game already have a ninja in it? Me?
It looks like you could use some help. You need...
No, really. I don't need anything. I've got this one covered.
What about ninja stars?
Got him right here.
A sharpened Japanese blade?
Got that too.
A grappling hook. You definitely don't have a grappling hook.
Ryu, I have a grappling hook. I don't need your help.
Oh, you must need something.
I need you to leave me alone so I can rescue these hostages.
Well, do you have,
Do you have over a dozen award-winning games, manga, and anime, and a legacy spanning almost 25 years?
No.
Then I know what you need. You need a fan base. Zing! Ryu, out.
You're a jerk, Ryu Hayabusa.
Ninja 5-0, the best game you've never played.
Welcome back to PixelTunes Radio.
That was a neat little track.
Yeah, it was Ninja 5-0. The song title was Master of Flame.
This game is probably one of the most expensive Game Boy Advance games out there, and honestly kind of always has been. I've been looking for it for years.
It had a very limited release.
Yeah.
It did not sell very well.
Late in the Game Boy Advance's life cycle, too, right?
Yes, and it is a fantastic game.
Really good game.
So if you want to imagine Ninja Gaiden mixed with Bionic Commando, with maybe a little bit of Metal Gear Solid mixed in with it.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, so you have to strategize on how you beat your enemies, you have to rescue the hostages, and then you have a grappling hook, which you can use to swing up and around, like do a full half circle to get on platforms above you, because you can't jump up through platforms, and you don't jump very high. So it's a lot of fun to play.
I just picture like the developers at Konami being like, well, actually, it wasn't Konami that made this; it was Hudson Soft.
Hudson Soft developed it, and then Konami published it.
That's
kind of
very weird. Yeah. Well, at that time, that was probably right around the time of the buyout, right? Because Hudson Soft got bought out by Konami.
Yeah.
So that may have been right around the time when maybe they were starting talks.
It's possible.
Probably, yeah. Because that happened right before, I think, the GameCube. Like, maybe in the middle of the GameCube's life cycle, and the Game Boy Advance kind of went through the GameCube's life cycle at that time.
Yeah.
So, that's a possibility, but I could just honestly picture the developer sitting down there like, okay, we need a new Ninja game. But it can't be Ninja Gaiden.
No, of course not.
So...
Because we're not Tecmo.
Let's steal that idea, and then steal Capcom's Bionic Commando.
Perfect. Bionic Ninja.
But how can we tie it all into Konami? Metal Gear.
Let's just have them publish it.
Metal Gear, yeah.
So, for those of you who do not live in North America, it was known as Ninja Cop in Europe and Japan, because I don't think the colloquialism 5-0, it means police.
Yeah.
It's like a slang for police in the US. I don't think the Europeans would really get that reference, at least not back then. I don't know if it's made it over there by now. But
it's funny, I always thought it was like a take on Hawaii 5-0.
Well, yeah, that's what it meant. I mean,
yeah, but I didn't know that at the time, so I was always like, is this like a side story to Hawaii 5-0?
Oh, because the terminology
was
I
always thought it was like a licensed thing at first, and then I actually played the game, I was like, oh my god, this has nothing to do with Hawaii 5-0 at all.
Not at all. So the music is really good. It was written by Aya Tanaka and Hiroyuki Tsuboguchi.
Tsuboguchi? Okay.
Tsuboguchi.
Do you want to say it again?
It sounds great if you keep saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
Tsuboguchi.
Yeah.
It'd probably make my kids giggle every time.
I just want a big, helpful bowl of Tsuboguchi.
Tsuboguchi.
That's terrible. I'm gonna get a written letter in the mail with like a blood handprint from Hiroyuki Tsuboguchi. Yeah. I'm coming for you.
Anyways, Tsuboguchi-san was actually more of a sound director and sound effect designer.
Okay.
Ninja 5-0 was the only game where he was actually credited for music.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting. So he worked on Tetris Party, some Bomberman games, Mario Party 3, Mario Party 6, Mario Party 9.
Wow. Yeah, those were all Hudson Soft. I always forget that Hudson Soft published those, or developed those games.
Yeah. And then originally he started off on Bomberman 64 in 1997. So, and then Aya Tanaka only has a couple games to her credit. Tengai Maikyo 0 and Mario Party 5, along with Ninja 5-0.
Okay.
So, a couple of artists that you don't really hear much from in other games. But together they came out and made a pretty good soundtrack. It's very sneaky. It's kind of like Metal Gear Solid, but has more of a beat to it.
Yeah, this track was very like a Danger Will Robinson sort of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you knew that you were in trouble. You knew this was like boss battle type song. Good stuff. I liked it.
Excellent. We're going to move on to the Phantom Sonic Advance 2 song. This one is probably the most unique song we'll ever play on this podcast.
So, and you know what's the best part about this is Ed didn't pick this one. This was all me.
Yeah, and I was on the fence about actually allowing it. I almost tried to throw in co-host veto power on this one. So, Mike, why don't you explain why it's so funky?
All right, so this song is from Sonic Advance 2. It's labeled as the Leaf Forest beta track. Okay.
Total misnomer.
It is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was absolutely going to be in Leaf Forest. Personally, I thought it was going to be in like the music note zone, where like they had like the keyboards and stuff, and I'll explain why. So, when I got a GameCube, one of the games that I got for it, probably within the first 6 months or so, whenever it launched, was the Sonic Mega Collection. Now, as a Nintendo fan, this was like a foreign thing to me because I didn't grow up with Sonic. Never really played any Sonic games other than the occasional, like, walking into Toys R Us. Oh, what's this, Sonic and Knuckles? Whatever, it's not Mario.
Meh.
Yeah, one of those. But then when I actually sat down and played the games, and when I took my head out of my ass and realized that other games on other systems were great too, the Sonic Mega Collection was actually one of the first steps that I took to becoming a non-100% guaranteed Nintendo fanboy. So, playing this game, I got to experience all the original Sonic games. It was great. It's a really great collection. However, they had video trailers for some of the upcoming games that were also releasing on Nintendo systems, such as Sonic Adventure 2, the DX or whatever it's called, the Director's Cut, basically, which I also ended up picking up, and Sonic Advance 2 on the Game Boy Advance. Now, this was pretty much a trailer for the game. This track plays in the trailer. And this track sold the game for me. It's so funny. I was like listening to this track, and I'm like, this song is really good. I'm like, the game's got to be awesome. And I'm watching this video, and it's very fast paced. I would say it's even faster paced. Maybe it's because of the resolution. I don't know, but it felt faster paced than the original Genesis game.
Yeah, and it was faster than the original Sonic Advance.
Yeah, definitely. So buying this game and playing through it, I'm like, I'm going to hear that track. I'm going to hear that track, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And I got pretty far in the game, but I never actually beat the game. And so for years, I thought, well, that's got to be an ending track, or that's got to be close to ending. And then while researching this track, I looked up Leaf Forest because I thought it was in Leaf Forest. It sounded like it could have been the music note stage in the trailer, but I was like, all right, let me try to see if I could track down this track. So I type in Leaf Forest, and all the Leaf Forest tracks I played through, I was like, this isn't the song. What the heck? What's the name of this song? So I look it up, and after researching it, I found out it's called, online at least, it's called Leaf Forest Beta Track. And so that's kind of why I picked this track, because it's a really amazing song that never made it into the game. And so it's technically unreleased, kind of like the Time Tracks thing, which is kind of how I convinced you. I was like, well, if you could play Time Tracks unreleased Sega Genesis, then I could play this. So,
and it's definitely a Game Boy Advance song. It was actually made on the hardware the way it sounds.
Definitely. So, as far as who composed this track, we do actually have some information on who composed the soundtrack. So I assume that these guys also worked on this track.
Unless they fired the whole sound team.
Yeah, and worked on this one song, and then they were like, peace out. So the three artists for this one were Tastuyuki Maeda, Yutaka Minobe, and Teruhiko Nakagawa. So kind of real quick to go through these guys, because they have done so much work. Maeda-san worked on Golden Axe 3, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Astal, which was a really cool Saturn game. Yeah, really good game. Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, Skies of Arcadia, Sonic Advance 1 and 2, Skies of Arcadia Legends, Shinobi, the PS2 version, Yoshi Topsy Turvy, Sonic Gems, Knights, all this crazy stuff. Knight's Journey into Dreams.
If you've played a game, he's made the
like especially a Sega game. Like straight up, this dude made so many games. For Minobe-san, worked on same thing, Skies of Arcadia, worked on like Sonic Heroes, obviously Sonic Advance 2, worked on a game called Sonic Unleashed, Sonic and the Black Knight, a lot of Sonic stuff here, Sonic Generations, Rhythm Thief. Have you played that game, the 3DS?
No, I haven't.
It is really good. Like when you get a 3DS,
I don't have a 3DS.
but when you get a 3DS, track this game down. I'm telling you, it's going to be one of those games that gets up in price. It didn't sell a lot, as far as I can tell, but it was one of the first games that came out like in the second wave of titles after the launch titles.
I mean, after the 3DS got good?
Yeah, like after the 3DS got good. So this was like an in-betweener. That's a great game. It's really cool.
Cool.
Really good rhythm-based game. Sonic Lost World, both the Wii U and 3DS versions. So this guy's still working for Sega, pretty much. And he started music he was self-taught. He learned to play the piano at 4 years old and was composing original works by the age of 8. So
wow.
He is definitely a music prodigy. And then the third guy is Nakagawa-san, and he actually uses Studio Vision Pro for sequencing. And the instruments he uses are very varied, but all the way from like Roland synthesizers to Korg, Wave Station. I mean, a lot of really cool stuff. But he did the soundtrack for Shinobi, Gun Valkyrie, which was a really awkward controlling Xbox exclusive.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
That game was really, it was like, I like the art style of that game, but I don't know, the game controls like a tank.
Yeah.
The character doesn't control well. Sonic Heroes, Sonic Rush, Knight's Journey into Dreams, they all worked on, all these Sonic games, Sega games. So he started out composing the soundtrack for Metalhead, which was a Sega game that came out, I think it was a 32X game, if I recall.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's
You're
right. Yeah.
I remember that one.
Boom! I don't even have a 32X and I knew what that track
Look
was.
at you.
I'm all grown up.
You're going to be called Mike Sega by the time this is done.
Mike Aga. It'd just be my name, like Mike.
Mike Aga.
It'd be like Mike Aga. Alright, I'm gonna shut up.
Please.
You guys listen to this beta track that's a weird one.
And the beginning sounds like that Katamari on the Swing song.
Yeah, you were saying that.
Yeah. So there's a little similarity.
It's good stuff. It's really cool. But yeah, so this is a really fun track. Sonic Advance 2 beta Leaf Forest, I guess. No.
Have a wonderful time.
Welcome back.
That was Pinball of the Dead.
Ooh,
I just got hit with a pinball. The name of that track was Movement. Muddy movement.
Girl, you like your movement muddy like I like my chips soggy. I don't like my chips soggy.
So, welcome to the Ed Show. I think every episode we threaten to leave at some point.
Yeah. That's it, I'm done. Table flip.
So, Pinball of the Dead was one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games. I don't know, I'm a sucker for these pinball games.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to Alien Crush, Double Crush, Mario Pinball on the Game Boy Advance, if you've played that. You know, the pinball games that kind of have a storyline and an action sequence.
It's cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
With it.
I like those type of games. I mean, it's just nice to see a game like that that's very, like, arcade-ish, I guess you could say, in the sense that there's no story, there's no characters that you really
it's just all
give a
action.
crap about. Yeah, it's all action. Exactly.
And it's weird because I really don't like regular, like, hardware pinball games that you like play in an arcade. I mean, I started off with pinball on the Atari 2600. That was one of the first games I owned. So it was, one of the first games I ever played.
Yeah.
And then I also owned pinball for the NES.
Yep. I love that game.
Video pinball's always just kind of been a part of my gaming experience, so I guess I kind of gravitate towards these games a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of pinball machines except for the Mario one. That one was
cool.
always the one that I was like, oh, I gotta have this, it's Mario.
Yeah. And I like the Doctor Who pinball game, just because I'm a Doctor Who fan.
Right.
So you kind of, you gravitate towards them based on the theme, and then you get used to the tables, so you understand how they work. There's a whole bunch of stuff to hit, but like you have to hit certain things in certain orders and get certain ramps, and it's like sometimes they don't do a very good job of telling you what you're supposed to be doing to get the higher
Sonic
scores.
Spinball's guilty of that.
Yeah. And especially on
what do I do?
On physical tables too. You're like, what?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So, anyways, the music in that game, I just absolutely love. It's got a very creepy industrial sound to it. Really, really clear stuff for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
It was composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi and one of our favorites, Hitoshi Sakimoto.
Mm-hmm.
Kawauchi is kind of the lesser-known one of the two, but he worked on a lot of Dreamcast games, House of the Dead 2, Dynamite Cop, Zombie Revenge. Those were mostly Naomi games that were ported to the Dreamcast, or also simultaneously released on the Dreamcast. And his most recent game was Blood Will Tell.
Blood Will Tell. What was that out on?
It was a PS2 game.
Okay.
Made by Sega.
Oh, okay.
So, he was mainly a Sega dude.
You know what I thought was really weird is this Pinball of the Dead game, it's developed by Sega, but isn't it published by THQ, if I recall? Yeah, please?
The European version, published by Sega.
Okay.
The American version
was published by THQ. Weird. Like, why would you not just publish that in America? That's weird.
That is kind of interesting.
That is weird.
There's got to be a reason behind it.
That is weird.
Listeners, if you know why THQ published Pinball of the Dead, send me a PM.
Send
or
us
a text message.
Why would
show up at my door, knock on my door, wearing nothing but a tie.
We're gonna do a racing episode. You're gonna like it.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. Especially since THQ is not the biggest publishing house in the world.
No, they're not. Well, they're definitely not now.
Well,
done.
Right.
R.I.P. THQ.
THQ, you were my love. So we're getting a little off track here. Who cares?
Oh boy.
Sigma Star Saga is up next.
I really like this game.
Yeah, this is a game that I was not familiar with until Mike picked this song, so I did a little research of my own. So why don't you explain the game a little bit?
Yeah, so if you've ever played Guardian Legend, this is pretty much Guardian Legend with an RPG story.
I've never played Guardian Legend.
Well then, get lost. Go play Guardian Legend.
We're firing each other, we're quitting, this is ridiculous.
Oh my god, table flip.
I'm saying, hypothetically, if the audience hasn't played Guardian Legend.
Alright, so, this is the way it works. You take two different genres. You take a top-down Zelda-ish sort of, RPG element for Guardian Legend, and then you kind of throw in shooters, like a horizontal.
It's like two completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, no, it's weird. I don't know. But it works. It works for Guardian Legend. It works for Sigma Star Saga. This game, you're basically... You play this character named Ian Wrecker, and he goes undercover against, I guess you could say, this people called the Krill, which, yeah, that's what happens. And so you go back and forth between these ship battles where you're in a ship, and you get this bodysuit thing that makes you look like a Krill attached to your head. It's basically like this really ridiculously looking... It's like if the Captain Crunch hat had like antlers. It's like an eyeball in the center.
Yeah, it's almost like a hammerhead shark.
Yeah.
But it's purple.
No,
it's like,
I want to envision the Captain Crunch hat with antlers and an eyeball in the center. A green eyeball. That's Sigma Star.
Horrifying vision, right?
Yeah.
Imagine seeing that staring at you while you're trying to eat your breakfast in the morning.
But what's crazy
Krillos.
is... So they advertise this game as... There's a little bit of a love triangle aspect to it, in a way, because you get multiple different endings, and the endings depend on whether or not one character dies or can be saved. And so there's this female character...
Silent Hill style.
Yeah, there's this female character called Scarlet, who, you know, you can save or can die or whatever in the game. And then this Krill girl named Sime, I guess you could say. It's like they took the word psychic and the word rhyme and put them together, so Sime. And so she's, you know, they're both these love interests, so when you see Sime, you're like, oh, this chicken's hot, look at her, she's in a bikini or whatever, like an alien bikini, you're like, wow, that's pretty hot.
At any point in the game, do you wreck her?
No. That's unfortunate. At least I don't think so. I haven't gotten that far in this game. But it was developed by WayForward Technologies, who, of course... It's funny because I thought that Jake Kaufman wrote this soundtrack.
Because they were in bed together in all the ways.
Yeah, you know how it goes. He's all like, oh, pass me that Sigma Star Saga.
I'll do music for
I don't know why he's like very like fancy, but because I've met Jake Kaufman, so he's a nice guy.
But he did not do the music for this one.
And he is not fancy.
No. So this music was... We're so sorry, Mr. Kaufman. This is the second podcast we've insulted him. If you guys ever show up at a convention together and he's listened, you're in trouble.
I'm gonna see him at MagFest next year and be like, listen to me.
Mike Tendo! We've got words to have.
So this game was published in North America by Namco, and in Europe it was published by Atari. So again, what's up with that? I mean, WayForward never really published their own games.
Yeah.
They always develop stuff and got it published by Capcom.
Whatever they're doing deals with, I guess.
Yeah.
And
it doing shady deals.
It costs money to publish.
Yeah,
so
true.
Whoever has, I guess, the best infrastructure set up at that time, you know, like with Pinball of the Dead, maybe THQ had the ability to ship a lot of games and Sega just didn't because maybe they were manufacturing too many Sonic Advance 2s and firing their sound teams.
Yeah, right? You know, I mean, come on. So this game, yeah, it's really good. I think everybody should really check it out because it's one of those... I wouldn't say it's like underrated because I think a lot of people have kind of stepped up and been like, this game is great. So people are kind of now checking it out. So it's slowly becoming one of those like cult titles that are no longer sort of cult.
Yeah.
I guess you could say in a weird way. But you can find it pretty cheap. I mean, it's definitely worth picking up. So this track, alright, so the way that we kind of got these songs is there was a partial rip that we were able to get, and so this particular song had a labeled title. Again, I don't know if this is the actual name of the track because online it's labeled as Your Adventure Starts Here. However, in the partial track that was titled and ripped, it's called City Under Siege. So, yeah, I don't know, it's weird like that.
They're not even similar titles.
No, I know, they're completely different.
Is the city under siege when your adventure begins?
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Because the aliens are attacking.
Yeah, the Krill are doing stuff.
Maybe it is.
In the
Who knows? I'm gonna quit.
I'm gonna have Jake Kaufman come on. He's gonna be the new co-host.
As long as you guys don't start throwing it in the butt, that's fine by me.
Well, he is very fancy.
Oh, God.
I mean, he has a wife, but he is very fancy.
Stop right now!
So, Shinen is the actual composer, not Jake Kaufman.
Correct.
Tell me about Shinen.
Shinen, it's a development studio, so there aren't any actual names named as far as the development or the composition of the song goes. Mm-hmm. So they're based out of Germany. They work mainly for Nintendo. They have over 200 soundtracks to their name.
That's crazy.
And they also developed audio, it's called audio middleware. So
Okay.
when I was talking about the different sound engines that the Game Boy Advance has, and some are easily rippable and some are not, they created one of these sound engines. So the games that Shinnen did for the Game Boy Advance, you really kind of have to do that manual recording through like the headphone jack or something, which is why this is the way it is.
Yeah, that's why it's very difficult to get this soundtrack.
Yeah, so they've developed a lot of their own games like the Nano Stray series, Iridion. They did some licensed titles like Maya the Bee, Garfield's Nightmare, but then they've also even done some Wii U, Nintendo eShop games.
Yeah, the Nano Stray series.
Yep,
Nano
Nano
Breaker,
Assaults,
all that stuff.
Art of Balance,
Yeah.
just coming out in quarter 2, and then Fast Racing.
Cool.
So, yeah, they're a pretty big outfit.
Yeah.
Why don't we check this song out?
Yeah, let's listen to this song. So again, this is Sigma Star Saga.
City Under Siege, or Your Adventure Begins.
Whatever you prefer. In the year 2001, Nintendo put out a Game Boy system that revolutionized the brand, the Game Boy Advance. In 2003, they revolutionized the brand with a built-in light and redesigned it as the Game Boy Advance SP. In 2005, they released a similar, smaller, more portable handheld called the Game Boy Micro.
Yeah, well, then the DS came out.
Wrong. That's what the media wants you to think. Nintendo has been working on a follow-up to continue the Game Boy line. Introducing the Super Ultra Game Boy Advance Micro SP Entertainment System.
Oh, well, it looks pretty cool.
The Super Ultra Game Boy Micro SP Entertainment System plays all forms of Game Boy games, has a built-in adapter for Rob the Robot for games like Super Ultra Gyromite Advance.
Oh, can it play Mother 3?
No, but it can make freshly squeezed orange juice. Just put the orange up to the sharp juicer tip at the bottom and grind oranges to a bloody pulp while you play the latest Mario game, Super Ultra New Super Mario Bros. Advance.
Well, what else can it do?
With a backlight hosted by the very inner core of the sun, games will look so bright your eyes won't be able to see anything. No, literally, I mean you'll need sunglasses so you can look cool while you play.
It sounds okay, I guess. Is there anything else?
Glad you asked, unassuming consumer. Super Ultra Game Boy Advance Micro SP Entertainment System is also trained in 6 different languages and takes voice command. However, at this time it only understands how to say, "Make me orange juice, Mr. Nintendo."
So, how exactly is that practical?
I'll tell you as soon as you stop eating chips.
But I can't stop.
Here, kid, have some orange juice.
Kid, I'm 35.
The Super Ultra Game Boy Advance Micro SP Entertainment System, now available at all Circuit City, Nobody Beats the Fizz, and Sunko Land.
Oh god, these chips are so good.
Will you cut that out?
Awesome track. That was from Serious Sam for the Game Boy Advance.
I really like that song.
There weren't very many Western composers that kind of started off in like that whole C64 scene on the Game Boy Advance. Like you're not going to see like Tim Fallon or Stolodosis or a lot of those guys. Alberto Gonzalez worked on a couple games, but they weren't like in the chiptune style. They had more of like a cinematic or a classical influence.
True.
So this was composed by Matt Simmons, who went by the moniker Format. Number 4, M-A-T.
I've heard of him before.
Yeah.
He does remixes too, right?
He does remixes.
Yeah.
He started off like in the C64 scene and did some Amiga games. He worked on like Chuck Rock for the Amiga, and then the Fantastic Dizzy series as well.
Fantastic Dizzy.
So he still does music. You can go to Format's Bandcamp page. There's a ton of albums on there that you can purchase and download. And then he's also got a pretty active Facebook page as well, where he will like work on music compositions, but then stream it via Twitch. So you can actually watch him at work.
That's neat.
So it's pretty cool. He does a lot of stuff with social media. You can follow him at format_cmusic on Twitter as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see more Japanese composers do that, because obviously I have a favor to...
Yeah.
I prefer Japanese composers.
I can't tell whether they're just more like culturally private, where they would rather work without giving away their secrets, or whether they're just on social media networks that,
probably
the Japanese use and we don't because of the language and culture barrier.
Yeah, it's really funny though, because when you look up stuff about these composers, mainly the Japanese ones, you would think that, you would get the idea that, they just play video games all day. Most of them don't. In fact, most of them have very boring hobbies. Like, they'll be like, I like fishing.
Yeah.
And Porchese.
Yeah.
And I have a cat named Roger.
And steamed buns.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the impression that you get when you actually, you listen to these songs and they're like, oh man, like, you feel like they're rock stars, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a composer, you've pretty much spent your entire life ensconced in music rather than video games. So you can have, you can appreciate video games, and that might get you into composing music for video games, but you're not going to be like a hardcore gamer, I don't think, because too much of your time is going to be spent on working on your music.
Yeah, true. Which I think is different from developers. I think more developers are actually gamers than video game music composers are actually gamers. Not necessarily true. I mean, like, if you look at, I'm going to bring him up again, but Jake Kaufman, I know he's a hardcore gamer, like I've talked to him about games on Twitter and stuff like that, and it's very clear that he will get as excited about a game that he's developing as any fan would. So, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah, and more so, I think the composers that are starting off nowadays have grown up with video games. It's been there all their lives.
True.
Whereas the people who compose like NES games, there weren't any video games when they were growing up. So they
Yeah.
were bringing more of their outside video game composing influence.
Yes.
So now it's almost like a parody of itself, where they've grown up with video games, so now they're composing video game music, so it sounds like modern versions of older video game music.
Right. Which is strange, because when you talk about like Grant Kirkhope, for example, so he was at MagFest and he was being interviewed, like he did a panel.
He did the GoldenEye soundtrack, right? For
he
N64
did
and
like
stuff.
Perfect Dark, and I don't think he did GoldenEye. I'm trying to remember. He might have, yeah. But I know that he did like a bunch of different games, and so Perfect Dark, obviously one of my favorite games on the N64. So he was talking about what his influences are, and he's like, like the Beatles, classical music. I really like the Star Wars soundtracks, and I'm like, really? Like, because a lot of
like Contra?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're kind of expecting that he's going to be like, I really like Wizards and Warriors.
Yeah,
that was my main.
Dave Wise is my hero.
Yeah, like. So, yeah, that game was really cool. It had really cool music. I really like the Serious Sam Advance. I've never played that game, but what about the game? Is it pretty good? I mean, it's a first-person shooter, right?
Yeah, and Serious Sam is like Doom on steroids.
Okay.
It's all about big open environments and tons of enemies.
Yeah.
So this kind of shows off, like I was talking about before with Doom and Doom 2, that 3D effect that the Game Boy Advance can pull off pretty well.
Yeah.
And it's just a fast-paced, obviously it's not as good as like the PC game or the more advanced ports.
Yeah.
But as a first-person shooter on the Game Boy Advance, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack, if you like this song, the entire soundtrack is really good too, and it just kind of keeps you driving through the game and beating everything up.
So I'll have to pick it up.
Yeah, we're going to move on to Astro Boy, the
Yeah.
Mega Factor now, which was developed by Treasure, correct?
Yeah, actually it was developed by Treasure and was brought to North America by Sega. They published it. This is also one of those underrated kind of masterpiece Game Boy Advance games.
Which is so weird, because Treasure was extremely well known at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they started marketing Astro Boy, and they were like developed by Treasure, like I got really excited because I know who they were.
Most gamers did, yeah.
Right, and then, so the lack of the sales numbers just kind of puzzled me, because I would think that Treasure hadn't made a game in a little while when this came out, and I was just thinking people were going to be flocking to this title, but it didn't seem like that happened.
Yeah, that's the big problem with Treasure games. They'll develop a game and it'll be really a fantastic title, but the game doesn't sell well. And that's a shame, because they put a lot of heart and soul into these games. You could tell that they're fans of their own games and they're fans of their work.
Yeah.
So when you see them put together a game like Astro Boy, I mean, you can compare it with, I would probably say Mega Man, which is not that far-fetched, since Astro Boy, the anime series, was a huge influence on the Mega Man video game series. And I mean, that there's no question about that. I mean, you look at Astro Boy, you're like, hey, look, it's Mega Man.
Yeah.
So this game had really cool, almost like a shooter feel to it, but also kind of was a platformer as well. So it was like a very mixed bag, and a lot of really cool sprite design and stuff. I mean, really awesome game. So this song is called Metro City, I guess. Anyways, this track was composed by two people, Norino Hanzawa and Tsuyoshi Kaneko. And Hanzawa-san composed a bunch of different stuff, mainly for Konami and Treasure, of course. Gunstar Heroes, Alien Soldier, Guardian Heroes, a lot of really cool stuff. Advanced Guardian Heroes, that was the Game Boy Advance game, which was a sequel to Gunstar Heroes.
Correct.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't know if it was a direct sequel, but it was like a...
Even the spiritual
the take,
sequel.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it has a similar name.
Yeah.
So.
And the Alien Soldier soundtrack is completely insane.
Yeah.
To match the game. I mean, really, really fast-paced, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And Tsuyoshi Kaneko, he worked on Astro Boy. I couldn't find really... I mean, he's a Sega guy.
Tsuyoshi Kaneko, it's not much really known about him. He worked on Sema, The Enemy, and of course Astro Boy for the Game Boy Advance. Before that, he did Sega Gaga and Record of Lodoss War on the Dreamcast. His most recent game was Disgaea 2 for PS2.
The sequel, yeah.
Yeah. So, mainly Sega games.
Yeah.
But that's all we can really dig up on.
Yeah, Atlas, Treasure, Sega, it kind of bounces around.
Yeah.
Word. So that's pretty much it for Astro Boy. So check out this track and check out the game. The game is really cool.
Oh, definitely.
The song is called Metro City, and here you go.
Enjoy!
Welcome back to PixelTunes Radio. That track was from Advanced Wars DOS, right?
Yeah.
Advanced Wars DOS, Black Hole Rising. And what was the name of that song?
It was Jess's theme.
Now, Jess, a girl. I've never played this game.
Yeah, she's one of
Okay.
the protagonists.
Okay.
Each character has a theme,
Okay.
and they all have different themes for their themes.
You want to try that one?
Well,
yeah.
That's
That's the explanation you're
well, I
sticking
mean, you
with?
could have a rock theme, or you can have like a southern kind of country theme.
Okay.
The villains tend to have like metal or like industrial themes.
Yeah.
The soundtrack in this game is all over the place. It
Yeah.
goes anywhere from like cinematic suspense to like straight out rock to dance. It's a really, really good soundtrack.
I'm not a fan of the beginning of this song. The bass sounds great. First off, I mean, really awesome slap bass. I'm not digging the beginning when it kind of
it has that mechanical clanking.
Yeah.
and it almost sounds a little off time in places.
It does, yeah.
But
but it's cool. I mean, it eventually turns into something
just
that I
a cool,
actually kind of
funky
like.
rock song.
Yeah.
This game is really cool. It's actually another one of my favorite games for the
Yeah.
Game Boy Advance.
I will never play this game.
Just a real... It's strategy, which I normally don't like, but it's simplified enough that I can kind of get into it, and it almost feels like an action game to me at
Advanced
times.
Wars keeps it simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's part of the cool thing of it, I think. I'm not a big statistics, crazy RPG kind of guy. I like things simple and fun.
Yeah, I am not a strategy guy at all. I like RPGs. Like I've said in the Mike's Picks episode with Final Fantasy VII. I'd say Final Fantasy VII, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy V. Those are probably three of my favorite RPGs. And Final Fantasy 3 or 6, somewhere in there, whatever.
Yeah, and I think those are so popular because they're so accessible.
Right, and I think that's part of the reason, because I gotta like the characters, I gotta like the story, and the combat system has to somewhat be fun.
Yeah,
Even
and
though
stuff
it's
like
very repetitive.
yeah, and stuff like Suikoden or Final Fantasy Tactics just gets so statistics based.
Yeah.
where
Can't do it.
some people love it.
Yeah.
That's
oh yeah,
fine.
no, that's totally
Great music,
cool.
great graphics, great
Yeah.
gameplay if you're into that stuff. But I just need something a little less involving.
Yeah.
I have kids.
Well, it's not even... the major thing with me is... So if I'm playing one of these games, first off, I gotta have a small cast of characters. Like, no more than 7 to 10.
Yeah.
If you have, like... That's why I haven't played Chrono Cross. Everyone's like, oh, you're gonna love Chrono Cross. It's cool, it's awesome, it's a continuation of the series, sort of. And I freaking love Chrono Trigger, one of my top 10 favorite games of all time. But with Chrono Cross, there's like hundreds of characters. And I'm like, no, I just want like a small cast, just like Chrono Trigger,
Yeah.
like no more than 7
to
to
have
10.
like a handle on those characters and
Yeah.
know how they operate. And
Yeah, and you know what? The characters, you come to grow and love them and care about them as the game goes on. Whereas when you've got like hundreds of characters, you really don't really care that much about the characters. The only exception to that, I would say, is Valkyrie Profile, which has these amazing cinematics and cutscenes that are really very emotional and very deep and detailed and go into most of the characters that you're going to be able to play as.
So, Advance Wars 2 was composed by Yoshito Hirano. We started off with Advance Wars 2. We did Fire Emblem, Paper Mario, The Thousand Year Door.
So a lot of RPGs.
Yeah.
Strategy, yeah.
And then he did the DS Advance Wars game.
Was that the one that was like a little bit more grown up?
Yeah, Days of Ruin.
It was like Advance Wars all grown up.
And then Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but then who didn't work on Super Smash Bros.
I
Brawl?
worked on Super Smash Bros. Brawl soundtrack.
His game that's coming up is Codename Steam, which is going to be on the 3DS.
Yes.
And
it
is
that recently announced game.
Yes, and it's going to be about a task force organized by Abraham Lincoln, and they're going to be fighting aliens.
That is amazing.
It's a steampunk 19th century theme, but it's going to be like an Advance Wars game. So you're going to have to deal with that. It's going to be in 3D though.
But it's going to be a strategy game, and you know how I feel about strategy games.
Maybe I'll get it and we'll play against each other.
Yeah. Or I'll just let you beat me. Just like
Strategy's better when you have somebody that you can physically taunt.
You jerk. I'm gonna kill you with my alien killers. Right? That's an Ed thing.
Yeah, alien killers.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something I would totally come up with. Jerk. So that's all the tracks we've got.
Yeah, we're gonna get out of here. So thanks again for listening. This is the second console or handheld spotlight that we decided to do. Let us know what you think in the comments, and please make sure to check us out on iTunes. You can and rate us, and that really helps get the show afloat and keeps it so that people are getting to know about the show, and we really appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving us. But feel free to give us a rating or give us a like on iTunes. Any feedback helps. So
tell your friends.
Yeah,
tell your dogs.
Do you know anybody who likes video game music and is interested in it as much as you guys are and we are? Definitely mention it to them, even if it's in casual conversation. Like, yeah, these PixelTune radio guys are real jerks.
That would be Jake Kaufman talking about us.
Yeah.
But this is episode 12, man. This is our 6-month anniversary.
We didn't get each other anything.
No, but we're both wearing party hats.
That's true.
In our pants.
Yeah. I'm glad that we decided to do that, to go that route, wearing party hats. Yeah, so I quit.
Again.
For
the 5th time
No,
today.
you quit. And now
is it my turn to quit?
No,
or
it's
is it
my
your
turn. It was my turn to quit.
Okay.
Yeah. So 12 episodes deep. We really appreciate the support and love and happy huggy feelings that you guys have given us for the past 6 months. We hope to continue that for the next 6 months.
Got it, man.
Yeah, man. Check us out on YouTube, iTunes. What's that Android app that we have the podcast on?
Double Twist.
Check us out on Double Twist. Any Android listeners. It's an app that you can download. You can listen to us. We're trying to get this podcast out there to as many people as possible. So the more you share, the more
we care.
Boom!
Oh, that's our new logo.
The more you share, the more we care. It sounds like a Huggies commercial.
So basically that means, though, if they don't share, that we don't care about them.
Yeah, see, man, you're Jake Kaufman-ing this.
Oh. Worst insult ever.
As in, you're making a really awesome soundtrack. And you're a really super nice guy. Good job, Ed. You've saved the day once again.
Hooray!
Oh my god. Anyways, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You know the drill. YouTube.
We need that LinkedIn account.
Yeah.
Keep saying it.
Yeah, LinkedIn. Yeah.
We gotta make that.
Check us out. We do podcasts and stuff. Bye bye. See you later.
Have a wonderful 2 weeks. We'll be back in a couple.
Bye.